All right, we are live, and today we're going to be doing something a bit different. I'm really honored to have on Rich Baris, a People's Pundit, and like Barnes, he's smart. He's saying peoplespundit.locals.com. Maybe I should do that with my own unstructured.locals.com. Since my channel's Eric Hunley already, it might be a little redundant having my name below, but I'm slow, I'm blonde. You got to work with me. This is a really cool, rare opportunity because Rich approached saying that he had a story to tell and he felt comfortable coming on the channel to tell it. And I'm like, awesome. So we're going to go through it. I am completely blind in terms of the story. I know the general parameter that it's an encounter of some kind, but Rich can tell you, I've gotten no information, nothing else. I deliberately want to be blind with the situation. So how are you doing today, Rich?
Living the dream as always. Thanks for having me back on. And that is 100% true. He's flying blind. He doesn't know anything about it. And that's probably the best thing.
KM says, just unleash Rich and stand back.
Well, I mean, we could do that. Your show, Eric.
No, well, we definitely want to go into this. And all right, I've got support here from Laura, and she's attesting it as well. So
all right, okay.
Let's go. What tell me what happened.
Yeah, so this was it is years ago. So we're talking December 2016. And I mean relatively recent, but it has been years. It's not something new. And we pulled it, and this is why, I mean, just to say, get a little bit of background. We do poll this issue, generally what people think these things are. You know, you saw the interview on 60 Minutes with the naval aviators, and this has really come to the forefront a lot. Past, Eric, we've had Jimmy Carter talk about this in his own personal experience. We've had Ronald Reagan, even one of the most conservative presidents we've had, talk about this in his own experience when he was governor of California. And looking at the poll numbers, I do see the way things are shifting. So we have never had more people tell us than not that they do believe these are legitimate encounters. That happened this year for the first time in years. And we ask a series of questions that surround this topic, whether or not people believe that there is life in somewhere else in the universe. Now, I can't tell you that's what happened.
That up.
That's it right there. And this was a big deal, because we have asked this question for years. So is Gallup, and we ask this is intentional. We ask a question like Gallup because Gallup has so many more years on us tracking it. So we wanted to basically mirror their questioning, so we would have be as consistent as possible. So with all of this happening in the industry, it's kind of an open secret because I have spoken to other people about this. And a lot of other people have said, well, come on this show, or let me interview you for this. And I told them, no way, in the beginning, no way. So for years, but you do this stuff, that's a lot. It's different. It's out of the box. And I thought that, other people could be looking and they could give their take on whether or not they think this is, or at least an in good faith story. Because if naval aviators can come forward, if U.S. presidents could come forward, then I think the People's Pundit could say what happened to him as well. That's a good place to just go into it. You want me to just go into what happened here?
Absolutely. And Laura did not vote for it either.
No, my wife was not happy with this. Laura, the boss, she was like, no, but look, I think it's important. I do. So if this turns out to be something, Eric, it would be one of the biggest blunders in the government's history. It means they really don't know what's happening, which is even scarier potentially than some of the other possibilities. But what happened to us, this is going back, like I said, to December 2016, and any reporter worth their weight in salt could find records to this because of what I did afterwards. They would be able to mock me for it anyway, Eric. So it's not, I'm not really wasting. I'm getting out and being able to tell it first is my point. So in any event, we're coming home one night. This is when we lived in Gainesville, Florida. And we're coming home from it was December, and interesting, and really close to Christmas, a couple of weeks before Christmas. And we're coming back from one of our favorite family hibachi restaurants. and I'm driving in a Jeep Liberty, which had a sunroof, which is important for this. Okay. And we're driving, and I see my wife kind of looking out the window to her right, and she's looking at something, but I know my wife, and I know she's got this really crooked look on her face, and she's puzzled. She sees something that she's, giving her, spinning her wheels a little bit. I look over, and before she even says anything, I see what she's looking at. And to give everybody, some context, I know this area really well, and there is a small airport there. So immediately I'm thinking, it's got to be some kind of aircraft. Maybe the military is running something over there that is some test kind of thing. But in any event, it was odd. And to tell people what it looked like, it was huge. That's what was so odd about it. First of all, not just the shape, which was also weird, but it was so big. It was breaking my brain how we could manufacture something this large, Eric. It was huge. And it was shaped like a triangle. I don't mean it was shaped triangular, like a stealth bomb or something. It was a triangle, a black
like a pyramid.
No, like a triangle that was 3D. Its sides were and interestingly, which I'll get into, they weren't flat and they weren't some shiny surface like you hear people say. If you looked close enough, which I did, because I was in the left lane. And I cut off this poor guy who was just a little bit behind me on the right, because I know the area and used to live in the development where it was hovering. So I cut off this poor guy and turned into the development to try to get underneath it, because it was so big. It was right there. And I eventually did. My kids were in the car and they were afraid. My son was, at this point, he was old enough to know that's not normal. And my daughter was young enough to be terrified. So I got basically right underneath it. And you could see there was structure in this thing. There were tiers carved in. So when I say it was a triangle, it was a triangle, but it had a 3D element to it. It wasn't flat. You could see it was wide, it had multiple levels. And underneath it had three large white lights. I don't know what they were, but they were bright. I don't understand how there could have been anybody else who would see this. But at any event, I get to a stop sign. I jump out of the car. I look underneath it, and it was so big. I mean, not big like Independence Day big, but big. Bigger than any aircraft I have ever seen. And it just tipped its nose up and it shot off and it was gone. So, I mean, a point in the sky, gone. It didn't go a little bit. Not a sound, not a single sound out of this thing. And I don't know how to, this is tough to explain. I don't know how to explain it other than this. When it was tipping its nose up to shoot off, the distance in front of it started to look like a distortion. I don't even know how else to say that, but the front, not the craft itself, what was in front of it started to look distorted. And then it was gone. It was, again, the size is what blew me away. And your brain, when you see something like this, your brain is not thinking, grab your cell phone and take a picture. Your brain is thinking, am I really seeing this? Is that real? Or am I hallucinating something? I mean, it's so unbelievable that your brain really breaks for a second and tries to process what you're looking at. So as I jump out of this car to look at it, I could barely hear my kids. My son he's ecstatic. He's excited. He thought it was the coolest thing in the world. My daughter, however, thought she's like screaming. She was afraid. She thought it was going to take me or hurt me in some way, because it was such an odd looking craft. And because of how her parents were reacting to it. I mean, kids aren't dumb. They can see you in awe. They see you looking at this thing and you're stunned, and I'm going back and forth with my wife, like, this is unbelievable. Do you see? This is incredible. And I'm trying to point out, like the different things that are on this thing that you just don't see not only every day, you just don't see them. The architecture was like its color. It was matte, like a matte black, like a matte MATTE kind of black. Right, and it was just something
not shiny black.
Not shiny at all. Yeah, which is what you hear a lot of people say it was shiny. Not this. And again, because you're trying to wrap your mind around it, I started to think, who could explain this to me, right? This is why it's kind of an open secret, because I started to make calls. I started to abuse, my not even media, but I know people who cover defense issues, cover different things, and I'm calling colleagues like, what could this be? Do you know anybody who could talk to me about this? What, maybe know what it could be? And of course they wanted to hear the story, so I told it to them. But in any event, of course, there's no answer there.
I'm curious. Could you describe the area around you? Like, well, I don't, what time of day was it? And I'm just curious, like you said something about a condo, like, was there any light sources nearby?
I mean, that's a great question. I mean, I could tell you exactly neighborhood and everything. It's a metro area. First of all, general location. It's a metro suburb area. So the restaurant's like 3 miles away from our house. And where we lived at the time, right in between, I would say maybe 2 miles away from the restaurant. I think it is 2 miles on the dot. There's a subdivision off to our right, which is where it was. And that one was called Hazel Heights. And we at that later in that time lived in another one a little bit later, a little bit down the road, about a mile, called Spring Tree. So I'm very familiar with that area. It's a generally dark area. So at nighttime, there are street lights, but this is a residential area. And there's no major source of lighting outside of street lights. The size of these lights, you know what Laura thought when she first saw it, she said it looked like lights from a football field. That's how bright when you're coming up on a stadium, or you're looking, I don't know how many people fly, but when you're flying and you're almost looking down at a stadium and an arena, their lights are on, maybe a game's going, they were bright. I would say even brighter than that, Eric. So, I mean, it was out of place. Completely
what were they illuminating?
Out of place.
What were they illuminating?
A whitish light, not whitish. It was white, and I don't mean like
what did you see?
It wasn't. That's the crazy thing about it. It wasn't. There was no beam coming down. It was just the source of the light was on the craft itself, and it wasn't. And I would say, which I'll tell you about in a second. I actually called people who investigate this stuff. So, I mean, anyone wanted to find out whether or not I saw or had some kind of sighting, they'd be able to, because it's logged and it's public. It's public information. There was nothing shining down on the ground, which was another very odd feature. Light illuminates and it projects, right? It travels at a certain speed. I mean, I'm thinking with my science brain now. It seemed like it didn't travel past the craft itself. It was just, it's very difficult to explain. But I'm telling you, when estimating how high off the ground this was, it was low, 500 to 1,000 feet tops. It was right there. I mean, it was. There's some things where you see, maybe you see a comet go by and you think, oh, what was that? This was not that. This was smacking you in your face right there, for better or worse. Now, there are tree coverings. So in that development, that's what I was really doing when I got to that stop sign, was going around different streets, trying to follow it, stay under it, because it was going it was hovering, but it was going a little slow, and traveling at a very slow rate of speed. And I had to find a spot where the tree covering was wide open so I could get a good look before you really come to a conclusion that this isn't something, you're trying to eliminate what it could be. I needed a real clear underneath it view, and I got one.
Now you were under it though when it took off. So I asked if you heard anything. You said no, but What about feel? What about smell? What usually when something launches or moves and it was that close to the ground, what was the experience?
It was oddly silent. I mean, everything. Not just the craft itself. Everything was oddly silent. I heard nothing. I smelled nothing. It's hard to say whether I felt anything, because you're feeling so much when you see something like that. Your body is literally on overload, right? So you're excited. You're a little afraid. I mean, look, anybody who says they're not is a liar, or you're crazy. There's something wrong with you, because I'm not really afraid of it itself. What I'm thinking is what it would take to build something like this, Eric, right? What would it take to build something that big, that enormous, that doesn't make a sound, that doesn't seem to have any visible place, any visible propulsion system. This thing didn't have ailerons. It didn't have it didn't even look like it could fly. I mean, if you had an engine on it, triangles in and of itself are not really aerodynamic, right? Or maybe they are. I don't know. I'm not an expert, but this was a blocky kind of triangle. It wasn't it did taper off at the end toward the back a little bit, but for the most part, just what you would think is like if you were to cut a brick, and throw a triangle brick, would it be able to fly? It was huge. But no, it didn't make a sound. The only thing I did hear was my kids, my one ecstatic, thought it was the greatest thing in the world, and the other one was terrified. But nothing from the plane itself, nothing, not a sound. And it's weird because I don't know how long it was there before we noticed it. And I turned down that street. But it took off when I got what I thought was going to be the perfect view underneath it. Maybe I had, maybe time stops, maybe 5, maybe 10 seconds from the moment I jumped out of the car and looked at it. It was unfortunately, it was a short time, but good enough to see, something that is truly unexplainable. There's no other way to put it. And
the car that you cut off. What happened to the other car that you cut off?
This is why I wanted somebody to look into this, and I did. I called an organization called MUFON, which is because this is somebody suggested I do this. They're not, I don't know what, they're not some quasi or quack kind of group. They're former investigators, maybe fraud, maybe police, whatever. They're a lot of these guys are insurance fraud investigators. They have investigation skills and have had in their past, or maybe even some of them still work. I mean, that's not their full-time job. These guys will try to track down people. Will try to see if anybody else reported anything. One of the things that shocked me the most is how that guy could not see it. I've talked to Laura a lot about this. We are pretty self-consumed people, right? I mean, we really are. And how often do we really stop looking at the world around us and look up? And, my wife is one of those people who does kind of like look and take in her surroundings. And it didn't shock me at all that she's glaring off, maybe, trying to look for whatever constellations in the sky at that time of year. That's just my wife. So she did see it. That was one of the things that I kept going back to with these guys. There had to be somebody else who saw it. And there were other craft in the sky. Like I said, there is a little airport, a small regional airport in that area. And I could actually see commercial planes in the sky. So there's just no way in my mind that nobody saw this thing. That's just impossible. It's so big. You had to be blind. And the other possibility is I really couldn't see the top of it. So if you're in an aircraft and it's flying that low, maybe you can't see it because of its color. Maybe at nighttime it's very difficult to see from the top. Maybe we only saw it because of the lights. I don't know. I'm speculating. I don't know.
Interesting. Now the structure itself, you were kind of describing, saying that it had structure, but it didn't have structure. So it was like it was flat, but it was wide. Was it like a scaffolding type of thing, or like a crane superstructure? Or I'm just curious.
It looked like tiers, like geometric kind of levels, where maybe they were literally different levels in it. I don't know, but it looked like jagged some areas, and I don't mean jagged with things sticking out. I mean you could see leveled off. There were, what was that? Like
a honeycomb?
But not flush. Like you could see, but a honeycomb, maybe you think of a honeycomb and you think of compartments. I would say that maybe that's what they were. I don't know. I mean, again, I'm speculating, but there was almost like scaffolding kind of looking, which is, I think that may even have been the word that's in the report. I may have used that word, but it was clearly tiered, where one side of it had little jagged, edges where you would see a level come out and then down and then in, but I don't know. Like, I don't know how to explain. When you see something like this, it's so impossible to explain. You're over your jump. You want to add something to it. Go ahead.
But I'm trying to say it was like think of a flat triangle. And then think of another flat triangle on top of it.
Okay, she's saying tiered, layered. So think of a triangle and then another flat triangle on top of it, and they get smaller as you go in. That's a good way. If you're going like this.
Pyramid-esque, but not.
Yeah,
not
but
like
don't use that word, because it wasn't a pyramid at all in its shape. The exterior of it.
Like
it's just when you looked on the sides, what you could see were different levels that did seem to go in. That's a good way to put it. Maybe like a triangle inside of a triangle that tiered in, Eric, as it went. And then that happened on both sides of it. So it kind of met in the middle. And in the middle was a little bit more narrow of an area.
I'm curious.
What was that?
How could you tell the shapes though? I mean, what was illuminating it enough to see the shapes? Or was it, what time of day was it? Was it not like completely dark there in Gainesville at that point? Or was it, how
no, it was dark. It just had those 3 lights that were coming from the bottom of it that like lit the bottom and then part of the sides, but not down. I mean, it was very, very odd. It didn't project, but it kind of encoded it a little bit. So on the bottom, it definitely exposed, you could see, it exposed the architecture. But yeah, it was dark. It was nighttime, and this was in the evening, and we're typical late diners. So I would say probably around 8 or 9 o'clock at night. So, yeah, I mean, it wasn't that, it was a clear night though. It was dark, but it was clear, very clear. No, not cloudy, no storms, which is, of course, Florida can storm on it in a second, but this was very clear. I would say the lights that were around too made it worse, honestly. If there was a street lamp, it probably would have just objected your view, been an obstacle to seeing it more clearly anyway. It was the lights that were projecting from the or not projecting, but coming out of the craft itself is what showed more of the detail on this. And then I got the best look when it tipped its nose and took off. That's when I really saw the back. Well, you could see the back, and you could see the scaffolding. Though is a good word, because just from a construction point of view, that's a good word.
Somebody in the chat said a stack of metal sheets, and Laura said yes.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. It's so hard to explain something that you don't see every day, and you probably never will see again.
But I'm going to beg for it anyway, because I do that. I'm just going to keep asking.
That's all right.
While we're talking, because you said you saw it taken off. Now, did it have a direction? Can you share that? Did it have a direction, a path? Can you describe that all?
Yeah. So it was hovering most of the time we saw it, but it did move a little bit towards, I think it's northbound. Towards 39. And it did move a little bit before it took off. But when it did take off, when I say it took off, I mean, it tipped up a little bit and shot off, as in, and I know this is where really you struggle to wrap your head around it, but this is what happened. It tipped its nose off and it took off to space, I'm talking about. And it was a pinpoint in the sky, like a star, within an instant before it was completely gone. So it was, you could blink and you could have missed it. Of course, when you're looking at it, you're not going to blink. You're fixated on this thing like crazy. There's nothing else in the world going on other than this thing right now. That's what happens to you when you see something that close and right in front of you. Everything else falls away. But yeah, it had a direction up. I don't know what else to say. And it was gone. It went from being huge to gone.
Like looking straight up or under the side?
No, an angle. It was not straight up. It was an angle. It tipped up its nose a little bit, like tilted just a little bit, maybe 45 degrees, and then was gone. And that was it. Just about, I would say 45 degrees, because it was enough where you didn't see the tree line. The tree line did not obstruct the direction it went in. So 45, 50 degrees, maybe tops.
Okay, so now, and you haven't found anybody but your family at this point who actually did see it, that particular one. Have you found anyone who saw one like it?
Yeah, well, interestingly enough, when they came, that's what, and I'll have Laura send it to you if you didn't look at it. But interestingly enough, they gave us, when they were there, the investigators from that organization, they gave us a database and a website, and they said you might notice when you go to this website that you certainly are not alone, including ones that are shaped like black triangles, just like you saw. And we did, and everybody else could go to MUFON too, and you could look. And Gainesville's what they would call a hotspot. There are a lot of people who see black triangles in Gainesville, and I mean, Eric, that's not the only thing. I mean, there are a lot of sightings in that area, and it's kind of funny how they do that. They'll put a little icon for a traditional flying saucer kind of craft if people, report seeing something like that. They'll put a triangle like the one you're showing right now. And again, that to me, what they put on their website, that to me looks like a B-2 bomber. All right, from a military guy's point of view. And that is not, I want to stress, that is not what this thing looked like. When I say it was a triangle, not triangular, it was a triangle. Almost, a perfect triangle. It was just a giant triangle that would, I don't want to measure it in football fields, but it was huge. It was huge. I mean, that is one of the things that I really struggled with.
Yeah, another type of thing, battleship or aircraft carrier.
Bigger, Eric, bigger. That's my point. Bigger. I don't want to just shoot out a size, because when I've seen battleships before, bigger. I mean, it was huge. I don't know that's one of the things I had when I was trying, because I did. That's just how my mind works. I'm trying to find out what it could have been. Not what, everyone wants to jump to little green men. I don't know what was in that thing. Nobody will ever know what was in it. But what I struggled with is that nothing that I have seen, was ever that large. I don't know that man has ever built something so enormous that would fly with that shape, that's and silent. I mean, when the U.S. military killed Osama bin Laden, everybody was going nuts that the world found out that we had stealth helicopters. That is not in the same class of what I'm talking about. Great for the stealth helicopter, but that is nowhere near what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is something that it would do to you what it did to me. I mean, it broke my brain for 2 days. I couldn't believe it. I had a hard time processing it, because I do consider, and what I do for a living, I do consider myself to be a math brain, a science brain. Immediately I go to people and say, what could this have been? And they laugh and they mock, and the military will call them an unidentified aerial phenomena, but that's not good enough. So this is my main concern, making jokes and, putting little tags on things. That's not good enough. Even the military now has acknowledged there are things that they don't know what they are in the sky, and this that their naval aviators are seeing, that other people are seeing. They have to find out what these are, is my point. You just can't forget about this. Flight safety, security, national security. Forget about national security, human security. Who knows, Eric? And I generally am not in the. Let's say it was something, from out of this world. I'm not somebody who would think that it's some kind of danger, because what I saw, I don't think they would have any problem with us whatsoever. I don't think we're a threat. I mean, what I saw is something that would make it, for me to comprehend what could have built that thing. It's like it would be like us now looking back on Native Americans if we came to the New World for the first time now with all this. I can't even make a comparison. So, I wouldn't, but still, it's within, somebody has to be looking at it. This cannot be something that just goes, without investigation. That's, it's just not serious enough. I think we're just beyond that point now. We really are.
And because I know you're connected to a lot of people. So when you put out the line, I mean, other than you said that they teased or whatever, did you get any kind of feedback? Like you said, other people saw these. Anybody, were they in a cluster time? How did that, how did they rate area?
Yeah, I mean, they do seem to be increasing. And if you even go and look at their, that area, I didn't know people had seen stuff like that in that area until that happened. And then, I started to look into it. But generally they have been increasing over time. I think it's, I just looked before we did the show, and I think it's up 11 or 10% from last month. So it's, it's bumping up. I gotta tell you, the people, there were neighbors who said, oh, we've lived here 20 years. Everybody knows about those black triangles, kind of joking. A guy up the road who he was in the Blue Angels, and he was, kind of shrugging it off like, yeah, everybody knows about those. And you know what? At first, the first thing that came to my mind when I heard that was that, okay, then maybe this is military, because if everybody around here sees them, that's a flight plan. And there goes my military heads kicking off, and I'm thinking those are scheduled maneuvers, right? But the more I got into it, more I called people. I did ask, is there anything? You don't have to tell me anything specific, but is there anything that this rises to that, to that level that you could say, yeah, maybe there was a project like that, or maybe there are a couple of things I think could explain that. But unfortunately, that's not what happened. And we had some really cool ones too. We heard about some really cool stuff, but nothing like this. The problem is the size and what it did when it departed. So, and then the no sound. Again, there's so many problems. No sound, no visible propulsion, no ailerons. How does this thing turn?
Aileron. I'm sorry, I've never heard of the term aileron.
Yeah, so just like a flap, right? On an airplane, you have ailerons, you have flaps, right? Depending on the kind of craft, what makes it go up and down, adds lift, reduces lift, left or right. What makes this thing turn? What makes it go up? What makes it go down? When it was tipping, nothing moved. And it was so big, you would have saw it, right? If an engine was gearing up, you would have heard that engine cranking up like it was coming alive and getting ready to go. Just like when you're on a runway. And I mean, I don't know how many people fly a lot. When you're on the runway, the pilot hits the throttle, the engine cranks up, you hear it, you feel it, everything starts going. At least there was no indication that this was anything traditional when it comes to propulsion. And anything anyone threw at me, it could not get around these 3 or 4 elements to the sighting, whatever you want to call it, that would really, they would have to explain that in order to put forward a plausible explanation for what we saw. And that didn't happen, which is, again, to me, it's unfortunate. I wish they had, but that's not the case.
Did it move like a magnet pulling it almost or something?
I really don't know how, because I even talk about this with my son a lot. He's like thinking, I was opening a wormhole, Dad. That's what it looked like, Eric. I don't know how else to put it. That's what it looked like. The
describe that again.
In front of it, the space in front of it was being distorted, like light is distorted when you've hold little experiments and look at how light can refract off of things. Like when you're looking into water and you see light reflect in water, it looked like the space in front of it, because it was so clear that you could see the stars, and you have a good view looking at the tip of this thing going up, and there seemed to be some kind of, I hate using this word, but there's no other word, field in front of it before it was going that was like pulling it. So instead of, that's why he's, it's a good way to explain it. The idea, the whole entire concept of wormhole, but that's the way he used to describe it, because it was pulling, instead of it going, it looked like it was pulling over it, it looked like it was pulling the space in front of it over it and moving forward. It happened so quick too, that you see it getting ready to happen, like what's going on. You see it getting ready to happen. And then it happens so quickly, you're like, wait a minute, rewind. What just happened there? Like it was pulling space in front of it like a sheet over it. And it was gone. I don't know how else to put it. And my son's like, it's a wormhole. It's a wormhole. They opened a wormhole and they were gone, Dad. And that's how they do these things. And I'm like, son, you don't know who they are. But because we did discuss the concept that maybe it's unmanned, then why would you build something so large, Eric, if it was empty? It just seems implausible and irrational to me, right? It doesn't make any sense. Right? I mean, an unmanned craft is small. Even the ones we fly, it doesn't. Predators, whatever. Their successors, they're not huge. Why would you build something so big if it wasn't also used for occupation.
I mean, it could be like a transport. I'm technically, you might build something big if you're transporting something from point A to B, and you didn't necessarily need a pilot.
Yeah, that's true. True. Yeah, I mean, and look, I'm up for anything, any kind of explanation. But what I do know is that I personally, I mean, my own belief is that I just don't know that we could do that. I'm sure the military has a lot of cool, nifty stuff that we all don't know about.
Right.
But folks, so big, it was just so large, and then moving the way it did. Look at what it takes for us to get into space, Eric. I mean, we put thousands and thousands of pounds of rocket fuel, strap it to a missile, and that's our MO, right? We do not do what this thing did. And, I just strongly doubt that it's the case that we can do it and we're just not telling anybody. I just think just sounds ludicrous to me. And if it was, where were they going? Right? Where were they going? If that was some kind of American project, then why would they appear to leave the atmosphere? It just doesn't make any sense.
Is there anything in the area? Because I so many sightings, and over time, is there anything in Gainesville that might be relevant or attracted? I'm wondering why there. That's, I guess.
Yeah, the more, it's funny because you got to really try to, when you're trying to learn more about this stuff, as I did, you'll realize quickly that it gets, it goes from plausible to maybe not so plausible, and then a whole lot of speculation. So I've heard a lot of different stories, including apparently there's an airfield in Florida, Eglin, I think it is Eglin, something like that, where it's big with ufologists because they believe some event had happened there years ago. So if you do see things, that's because the military allows them to go there. I mean, it devolves very quickly, so we could speculate. There's that airport, which is why I went back to that. I have seen C-130s, old C-130s, being, in and out of that airport, went on humanitarian missions. When there's a hurricane, FEMA will definitely use that airport if they have to in a pinch. What else? The University of Florida is there. It's a cool factoid, but I don't know how it explains the sighting. The coldest place on Earth is at the University of Florida. It's where they do experiments on how matter and property react at 0 Kelvin. I mean, so there's a lot of cool things over there. There's an abandoned, atomic facility, but nothing that would, it's just nothing that's relevant to that outside of that airfield, which the military does use from time to time. So when I first saw it, it was not beyond possible to me that the military would use that, that the military would use that as a way to, maybe tuck a military test in with commercial flights, at some point. That has military written all over it. But again, I go back to, I just don't know how they could test something like that. And especially with all the stuff that happened with ATIP, Eric, by the way, that's when I really, started resolving to the idea that was not us. Because they're looking at the tic-tac footage, and if they can't do that, then they can't do what I saw something do.
I was wondering if you have polled by chance, because, I really don't follow this stuff, but what little I've heard is it seems like there's clusters, like a bunch seen here, a bunch seen here.
Yeah.
And then, where I am never seen and nobody sees anything, in many other places. So have you ever run any kind of poll or anything to say, okay, cluster? Are the triangles specific to Gainesville, or are they at different points in the country? Things like that. We haven't polled the different or various kinds of, sightings that people have, but we ask people whether or not they have personally seen, an unidentified aerial vehicle, or whatever term you want to use. I'm using that term, but UFO is more commonly known. About 20% of the country will tell you they did. Interestingly, what this last polling just threw me for a loop. It does not fit the media narrative. We looked regionally. What is it? More rural? Is it more metro? Is it more suburban? Is it more northeast? Is it west? The West maybe has an edge, a little edge over the rest of the country, and the West and the South, than the Midwest and the Northeast.
but the difference is not that statistically significant. So it would be hard to nail that down. It does seem like everybody except for certain. So what I mean by that is there are certain groups that you could pinpoint. It's easier to pull them out of the non-believers. It's easier to pull certain groups of them out than it is to be able to find disparities between people who say they have seen or believe. So I could tell you a metro educated, post-grad kind of person is least likely to believe any of this. Whereas, if you listen to the media or anybody else, you may think the white Southern evangelical would be the least open to this. That we found that is not the case.
We're going to go joking, right? If we're joking, the same people who see Elvis, that kind of thing.
Yeah, right, exactly. And actually, in the polling, we did not find that. And just for the record, not that this is about a conversation about spirituality, but I consider myself to be not evangelical, but I consider myself to be Protestant. And I don't think my belief in a God conflicted with this at all. What conflicted was, how could we not know what that is? Right? That is what I had a hard time wrapping my brain around. So, okay, I saw that. Other people who have seen it don't sound so nuts. And how could nobody take this seriously? And how could nobody know what this is? Now, apparently, we now know there are people who have been taking this seriously and are people who have been investigating it. But that was not public at that time. Those were rumors and whispers, which we heard when I decided to pick up the phone and call everybody who I thought was, could have some relevant information. And then we did hear that there was a program. But that was because, people we know. It was not out publicly, is my point. So that's where my conflict came from. And it did settle me a little bit that, all right, maybe there is somebody taking this seriously. But to me, this would be the biggest, government neglects a lot, which those of us who talk politics for a living, we talk about every day. National debt, right? Maybe healthcare is not good enough for some groups of people. That's a failure, right? These are the kinds of terms we're talking about. To me, this would be the single biggest failure if the government really didn't take a serious look at these things. And not just a failure, it would be negligent. So there are fundamental roles of government to protect you, right? To know the threats out there. That's the entire point of a social contract, right? John Locke. That's why we don't have a state of nature anymore. We agreed collectively to abandon certain rights for safety we can't provide ourselves. This is a fundamental violation of the social contract if they don't know what that is. And one day, I think eventually this is going to be mainstream. I really do, because I don't think you can hide this. You just can't. It's not, look, even if the government wants to, whoever, put that in the sky. They don't give what the government intends to tell us or not. They were flying at nighttime over suburban areas in Metro Gainesville. Right? So I don't think they asked anybody's permission whether they could do that before they did it. They did it, and they didn't care. Look, I don't know how you don't expect to be seen if you're that large and you're right there. So they have
the perspective of, do you really worry about what an ant thinks of you when you walk over their hole?
Which is why, Eric, I do, over time, I do lean more and more in, I'll never know for sure, or at least I probably will go to my grave never knowing for sure. Maybe generations ahead of us will learn more about this topic. And that's obviously hopeful, but that's from my own perspective. That's what I think too. So how could you be that, have that kind of chutzpah, right? Unless you just simply didn't care, unless you look down at something so insignificant, or dare I say inferior, and just not care, right? Because would you care whether or not, the ant sees you walking on the sidewalk on the way to your car? Would you care?
No, you don't even know that ant's there or acknowledge it.
That's right. Right.
Intellectually, you know it's there, but you just don't really think about it. So then that's sort of my goofy analogy. Now we pulled up the poll earlier, and you were saying that this shocked you. Now, how frequently have you run it, and what kind of a jump was this that it was so different than typical?
Yeah, we've been running it for a couple of years, right? So April of, I believe, 2018 was the last time we had run it before, but we had asked, and I don't want to give a client's name away, but we had been hired to ask this question in the past. And I wanted to mimic Gallup's question so we could provide them with context. So that's why this question is the same as it was in 18 when we did that as well. This is only about a 6-point jump, 6 to 8 point jump on most of these 4 questions. But the difference is right there, at least some can be attributed to extraterrestrial intelligence visiting the Earth, as opposed to explained by human activity or natural phenomena. We have never had that first option exceed the human activity and natural phenomena. And it has been close. But this is about, what looks to be a 6-point shift. But that 6-point movement is made up of that second choice coming down and that first choice coming up. So that tells us, and there's a big chunk of unsure. There's also a lot of people who, if we cross that or do what's called nesting the variables, you can see that people who tell us they're uncomfortable talking about this or telling the truth about their political beliefs, they're a big chunk of that unsure. So you rest assured, it's very likely that there are more people in both categories, and it probably leans toward at least some can be attributed to extraterrestrial intelligence visiting the Earth. And we ask these questions in different manners to try to see whether there are some people who are willing to admit some things but not others. And those, that comes back, those indicators come back positive. So more people think that the government is hiding information about this topic than are willing to acknowledge that they believe they exist. So if that's true, then why would you think the government's hiding something about something you don't believe exists, right? So that's kind of a way we'll use to trick people into telling us the truth. And we can generally see that number's coming up, and the age groups are what is telling us that this is likely to continue. You have that X-Files generation that, right? They were, that's what we call them. We don't know how else really to refer to them. They're now older. So that older constituency that, 10, 20 years ago may have told you, oh, that's crazy, that's nuts. They're now the X-Files generation. And the newer age groups are, are younger people, and younger people tend to, at least keep an open mind to some things that older generations don't. That's not the case anymore. Now it's pretty widespread, even by region, which you have up there as well. You can see, really, there is no huge difference. The Northeast and the Midwest are a little bit, 3 points, 6 points below the West, but generally it's everywhere.
Interesting. That is fascinating.
Which is another reason why I thought, now is we can share this. I mean, this is the direction this conversation is going anyway. So it may be mocked for another couple of years, and that's about it.
Well, hey, this is perfect. There's Alex Jones is on Sidebar last night, right? No, what is it? They say a conspiracy theory plus 2 years is news, or
yeah.
something like that.
So I know that expression. I don't know exactly how it's phrased, but there's some truth to that. Is there not? I mean, really, there is, or at least on some of these topics. And now I think, we even knew about senators, getting briefings about this stuff. This stuff is happening, and it's not because of some attempt to distract the public. And anyone who knows the background knows that's not true. This was a legitimate, or I would say a legitimate curiosity by 2 very powerful senators who got the ball rolling. And the only reason why we know what we do is because of organic interest and public pressure and talking about it. And because of one very brave guy who resigned so he could tell his story about what he's been doing for the government for all of these years. And I'm of course referring to Luis Elizondo. and that because of him, we have a lot of this information. But he was hired to do a job that two very powerful senators got the funding for. And I just think eventually, like I said, it's moving in this direction in pop culture, in the national, psyche. It's moving in this direction, and it's even moving that direction on Capitol Hill. So I think I'm pretty secure talking about it now.
Cool. Well, we have a few minutes, so I just want to put it out to the chat. So, any questions wanted to come in, give everybody a chance to ask it. So they may already be asked and answered, but it's still worth going through. So folks, please ask questions right now. I see chat's just talking amongst themselves, but I am very much.
Shoot. I think it's so hard to, recollect every detail when you're trying to pull back these kinds of stories. But, I think I laid it out, as best I could, and again, to just, if I had to reiterate something, it would be the size, Eric, the size and the lack of sound. And that's just what, then when it happens, I really tell you, everyone says, why didn't you take a picture? Why didn't you get a picture? Let that happen to you and see if your first thought is to get your phone and take a picture. And the phone was in the center console right there by the shifter in the Jeep Liberty. It was right there. But I was just so amazed. First thing I thought was get underneath that and get a good look, a really good look. And
good question
was not grab the camera.
Did it affect any electronics?
No, not that I noticed. That's a good question. No. The only electronics it affected was that I went out and spent $3,000 on a Nikon high ISO camera that could tip high ISO, meaning it takes pictures in the dark, because I didn't want some blurry, cheesy image. I swear I did, Eric. And I sat outside on my front porch. I sat outside my front porch in Gainesville, Florida, 3 months at least, a couple of minutes every night, if not more on weekends. Just like, you know what? You'll laugh last. And you know what I was thinking back then, because I was the editor of PPD. I was thinking, oh, we're going to get a photo. That's what I was thinking about clicks, Eric. I'll be honest. I'm like, if this thing is something, because at that time I had already heard from neighbors and people had said, I saw it. So, well, if it comes by here quite a bit, then I'm going to be out here snapping shots. That was my first thought. And of course, no.
Okay, this is a good one I didn't think about, but Ziggy Shrug wants to know, what was the time from when you first noticed it until it disappeared? Like the whole event.
Yeah, maybe 60 to 90 seconds in the car, and another 5 to 10 by the time my foot hit that pavement and I was out of the car and looking up at it. So altogether, I think it would be safe to say, 2 minutes tops, because it was so quick. I cut that as soon as I saw what she was looking at. I knew, a person when you've been married to him for 15 years. At the time, I think it was 15 years. And I could see the look on her face. So I looked in that jet, because she started to say, Rich, do you see that? Are you looking at this? Am I seeing what I think I'm seeing? By the time she started to open her mouth, I already had looked at what she was looking at. And I cut that wheel like, sorry, buddy. And I cut him off to get in there. And I did. So we weren't on the road long at all. And I was weaving in and out of some streets trying to get the best possible, place where I could park and look up. But that's what, and I hate to use the word intelligence, but that's what makes me think something was intelligent about it, because it had been sitting there. I don't know how long until we came by, but it was just sitting there. It only took off when I pulled in and clearly was trying to get under it, and it was moving just a little bit. And then when I got under it, it left. Maybe it was, I'm speculating. Maybe it was going and doing what it was doing. It didn't care whether I was there or not. But I wish I had gotten there a little bit earlier, and I had more time. I really do.
I have a
because
super
there was
chat
just so much to take in.
super chat asked me to look up the battle. What is it? Battle of Nuremberg, 1561.
I actually I'm not full on the details, but I actually came across a lot of these kinds of stories when I was doing research, and that's very interesting. Yeah, people claim, and the text claimed to have witnessed an aerial fight before anybody could fly here, which is, there's a lot. I got to be honest with you. I don't want to go into this, but I found a lot of stuff. When I also found, something that had happened in Texas at the end of the 1800s. I mean, apparently there's stuff that's been going on for a long time.
I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that's pretty similar, but I mean, it's hard to make a rendition. I drew it. My wife, that's something, when I tell you they're serious investigators, these people were serious investigators. They separated my wife and I. They made us tell our stories. They made us draw it, separately. If the drawing is on where the log is on their website, you'll see what I drew. And Laura's a much better artist than me. You'll see what she drew. That's even better, I would say. I've looked online, of course, for a lot of these different images to see if I could find something, A, that explains it, or B, that somebody else had seen and kind of made an artist rendition. I would say that, of course, is close, but I would say it was fatter. It was like fatter, maybe because I was so close to it. That's the angle I was seeing, which was the rear and side. I caught it from maybe like a broadside view of 3/4 of the rear, and then from the right side of the craft. That was our visual to it. So maybe, if I was looking at it from the front and the side, it would look more flat. But from my angle, it looked very high, not fat, height. It had height. A lot of different, which is where it had those like kind of stacked scaffolding, like, compartments. I don't even know how to explain them outside of that. That's the best, but we drew that, and maybe that's on the site. And if it is, I'll try to find it and
because I'll definitely put it out there at a minimum on locals.
Laura kind of nailed it. I mean, when I looked at her drawing, they could tell I was like stick figure guy over here,
that one. It's that.
I'm not good. I am not good, but Laura, mine still was an attempt to try to draw what Laura drew magnificently, because she can draw, and and what was that you put up? It was Phoenix Lights. Is that what that was that somebody had?
Oh, what I pulled up was the Battle of Nuremberg, 1561. So something happened 500 years ago.
Okay. The other one with the black triangle. That was the same thing. And I just looked at
it was the same. It was a Google search, and I decided to go for the image search because we're video. But somebody did an article and is kind of showing the triangle in that. I think they were drawing comparisons of modern to then, but potentially. So it might be worth looking at.
I get it. Yeah, I will.
Owen wants to know, did it alter your perception of the world? And do you look at the night sky differently?
Yes and yes. And just to give more detail, I mean, first thing it did, was make me feel small. It made me feel it made me feel not insignificant. That's not the right word, just small. So, I consider, like I said, myself to be a believer, in like a Christian believer. That didn't bother me in that way because, look, I think it's kind of arrogant to say human beings were created and God only created us because we're just so great, right? I mean, if I only created us, I'd be pretty disappointed. So that doesn't bother me in the least. But it did make me feel like, again, like we were missing out on a lot. If that, like, so let's entertain that craft and other things that people are seeing were truly designed and built by another civilization, an extraterrestrial civilization. It made me feel kind of sad. Why haven't they invited us to participate in their world? Why are we being locked out like this? And honestly, when you look at our behavior, I really can't say I blame them, right? Would you want to invite, it's like if you're in a survival group, right? Would you want to invite that one guy or girl who just takes up more than they need and tears everything down, like destroys everything, would you invite that person or that, group of people into your world?
We do it ourselves. There are tribes in the rainforest in the Amazon who have been recently discovered, and we don't mess with them. We deliberately kind of observe them, pretend we don't exist. So, it could be.
And with the skies, I look at them more. And with the skies, Eric, I look at them more often, because I really do think, you say, how could this not be known knowledge if I just saw what I saw? How could I be isolated like this? Or, whoever sees them, how are those who have seen something like this so isolated? So I look at the sky more now, because I believe that we are hyper focused on ourselves. We're hyper focused down here. Now we don't really look up. And maybe that's why there are so many of those, like the viewer who pointed out the Battle of Nuremberg. When I was, my brain was broken and I started researching, there's a lot of those. As a matter, there are a lot. Well, that was before human civilization was so filled with technology and focused on their cell phones. We're constantly looking down, right? We're constantly looking down at something. We're not looking up and taking in the beauty of the universe anymore, like the people who came before us did. Maybe that's why they did see so much more than we claim to see, because maybe they were just more attuned with the world, and we are not. We're too self-absorbed, and it takes somebody like Laura, who's always very imaginative, looking up, looking around, being observant. I would have missed it, Eric. I would have missed it. Driving down the road, I would not have seen it. So now it changed. That's how I change how I look at the sky. I look at it more often. And I'm always looking for something now. I am. Look, once you see it again, once you see it, you're dying to see it again. You are. You can't let it go. You'll obsess over it for a while when you do see it. I obsessed over it. I bought a multi-$1,000 camera I never used just to get a glimpse. And I sat out there. I tried to recruit family members. Come on out here. Eventually you got to learn to live with it, but you want to see it again, because and maybe everyone's a little bit different, but somebody like me, I can't stand not knowing. Like, it bothers me that I may die not knowing what that was. That digs at me. Yeah, I may grow up, old man, never see anything like that again, never get any answers, and go to my grave not knowing what that was. And
Lord,
that
you also want to prove to yourself that you in fact did see it.
You also want to prove to yourself that and that she's right about that. Part of the camera thing, babe. Yeah, that's buying the camera was because I really wanted to tell everybody. I did. I wanted to tell it, but I there was just no way I was going to do that without a picture. There's just no way. And I told friends who were in this industry, they know about this. And you'd be surprised how many people think they saw something, Eric. They're just not willing to come forward and say it. But yeah, like I said, it's kind of an open secret. And a lot of people have tried to have me on their radio show or whatever. And come on, man, tell the story. I'm like, no. But now here we are. And this was a good venue to do it, because I know you'll have people come on and pry it
definitely
apart.
Well,
and good.
What I'd like to we're going to wrap up, but I want to put it out there to everybody. There's a whole comment section. Please consider using that to describe whether you believe it, don't believe it, and share your own story. It really, really, really will help, especially, it might help somebody come forward that did see something similar or was in Gainesville at the time. I believe 2016, December. Anybody
December
out there?
11th, I believe it was. December 11th, I believe.
Okay. And if not Gainesville, anywhere, anything, please comment, because I'm pretty sure Rich is going to be reading the comments and seeing, hey, did you see something? Did you not? Obviously, we're both on Locals, peoplespundit.locals.com. I'm unstructured.locals.com. And for the veracity, and Rich actually asked for this, so it's perfect. I have a couple behavior folks, half of the behavior panel actually, who've been watching this the whole time, and they'll be on the show here tomorrow, 6 p.m. So please consider subscribing, and we will talk about this. We will
I
also
can't wait
talk
to see what they come up with.
We're also going to talk about John Pierce and one question he was asked on Tim Pool, and I know Rich is very interested in that too, and Barnes I believe, as well.
Definitely, we'll check it out. And on my on the show tomorrow, I'll make sure to remind viewers to check that out.
Awesome. So, Rich, this has been amazing. Everybody, thank you so much.